So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar, zero patience for slow walkers, those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night, have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
Hello and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40, created and hosted by me, journalist and author Sam Baker. My guest today is the American author and essayist Melissa Febos. Melissa has written 4 award-winning books: Whip Smart, Abandon Me, Girlhood, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award in the States, and Bodywork. She's won far too many prizes to mention here. Her writing has appeared all over the place. In her mid-30s, after, let's just say, a pretty horrific 2-year relationship, Melissa decided to step away, not just from sex, but love, relationships, intimacy in general. At first for 3 months, then 6, then ultimately for a year. 3 months? I can hear you going, hardly a big deal. Well, you might think. But for someone who'd been in one relationship or another solidly since she was 15 years old, it was the start of a long road to breaking a 20-year serial monogamy habit.
It's almost like folding all of your desires into one place and thinking, okay, as long as I keep this person happy and I have a good relationship and this person's not mad at me, then that's being happy.
Soon, Melissa realized she was not just taking a break, but making a change. One that would affect not just her relationship with friends, family, and lovers, but with herself, her work, and the way she lived her life. The result is her new memoir, The Dry Season. Melissa joined me from Iowa to talk about that year of celibacy and what it taught her about independence, creativity, sexuality, and above all, herself. We also discussed shaking off the soup of sexual prescription, the happy ever after narrative, women's celibacy through history, sexual fluidity in midlife, and why she's obsessed with the TV detective Vera. So you actually did this in your mid-30s, didn't you? So
I did.
Why did you wait until your early 40s to write it?
Well, the goal of the celibacy wasn't to write about it. And, I think while it was happening, I understood that I was undergoing a profound experience. And so I probably assumed I would write an essay about it someday or something, but that wasn't at all the goal or the plan. And then a few years after it, just maybe 3 or 4 years after it, I did decide to write an essay about it, and I started it. And I had been thinking it would be like 10 to 30 pages. And as soon as I started writing, it had that lightning quality where before I knew it, I was 40 pages in and it felt like I'd barely started. And I thought, I have a lot to say about this and I don't have time to do it right now. So I kind of set it aside. And then I ended up publishing 2 other books and life got in the way. And I thought, I'll go back to it and see if it still has a pulse. And then I did, and it did. So yeah, then I sort of repotted it and thought, I think this is probably a book, and really devoted myself to it.
Yeah, I mean, it really reads like, I know it didn't flow probably when you were writing it, but it really reads like that. It really reads like,
I'm so glad. I mean, that's just the best thing a writer can hear. I would say it didn't all flow like that, but parts of it did. It felt because I had done so much thinking about the subject, and in the intervening years that I sort of knew I wanted to write about it, I went and revisited some of the reading I'd done, and I was really sort of mulling it over. So a lot of the thoughts I had were pretty developed by the time I sat down. So it was one of the less painful pieces of writing I've ever done.
Well, yeah. Tell us about what was the definition of celibacy in the first place for you?
Sure. I think when people hear the word celibacy, they think sex. It's not having sex. And that is also sort of where I began. But my impetus for taking a break was that I had a horrible breakup after having been in relationships pretty nonstop from my teens until my early 30s. And the last one I had in my early 30s was horrific, really dramatic, addictive relationship that kind of left my life in shambles. And I thought, what is the common denominator here? What is going on? I need to take a break. And I thought, sex is the common denominator. So I'll spend some time celibate. But very quickly into that period, after not much reflection, it became clear to me that sex was not actually the problem. I mean, it was present, but the problem was the way that I was approaching and relating to love and romance and intimate partnership, and that I needed to kind of overhaul my whole way of doing that, which meant I had to change my own beliefs about it and develop a kind of new ideal for the sort of relationship I wanted to have.
Why do you think that moment, rather than, like you said, you were kind of serial monogamist, like serial monogamist from what?
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
Was it I say simply, like it's not a big deal, and obviously it's a big deal. Was it simply that coming out of a really shit relationship? I'm just interested in why then, why not previously? Why, you know?
Well, it had been suggested to me previously. Friends and family had definitely said a few times, it might be a good idea to spend some time single, or you're kind of always falling in love or breaking up with someone, it seems. And my story about it that I said to them and to myself was that I was a romantic and I was just the kind of person that fell in love a lot, which I didn't interrogate because I didn't really want to, because the implications, if that wasn't really the story, were scary to me. And so I think I had avoided it and sort of postponed it for a really long time, even though I had this anxious sense that they were likely right. And spending some time alone would probably be really good for me. I think I didn't really know how to stop. It was just the way I had always been. And so it just felt easier to keep going as I had been. And I think when I got to that point, that relationship, I was really hitting a kind of bottom, and there were parts of me that had been untended and kind of starved for time alone and what that would mean for a long, long time. And I just had been ignoring it because I didn't know how to recognize the feeling.
It's that kind of thing, isn't it, where what you need and kind of what you fear, I mean, in terms of, for instance, alone time, might be the same thing?
Yeah. I'm going to skip ahead. When I spent time alone and sort of realized what I'd been missing and how much I needed to just be unperceived and share my own company. When I first got into another relationship after the celibacy ended, and this feeling cropped up, this kind of frustrated, itchy, emotional feeling, I recognized it. I thought, oh, I need to be alone. I need some alone time. And it was like, it wasn't until then that I really looked back at all those years in relationships and I thought, oh my God, I was having this feeling the whole time. I just didn't know it. I thought that I was just annoyed with my partner or I needed to break up with them. But actually, I had just individual needs. I had needs for alone time or needs to spend time with other friends that I was ignoring because I had this idea, this very instinctive idea that I needed to orient myself to my partner sort of above all else. And that actually didn't work for me at all.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think whatever one's personal experience, that kind of what you describe then, that itch or that, and not recognizing that itch because you almost don't know that you're allowed to have it because what you're meant to do is keep that person happy.
Yeah. It's almost like folding all of your desires into one place and thinking, okay, as long as I keep this person happy and I have a good relationship and this person's not mad at me, then that's being happy, right? And then the confusion when that seems not to be working, even though I was working so hard to keep those relationships functioning, it didn't work. And I didn't really understand why, because I think my choices were not conscious choices. That belief was buried deep inside me that I needed to keep a partner happy and that that's where my satisfaction ought to come from. Like up here, I was a lifelong feminist. Like I knew that I would have laughed if someone had suggested that to me. And yet I was making these kind of instinctive decisions and prioritizing my partner's wants and needs above my own. And then I was angry and frustrated and I didn't understand why.
Where do you think that started? Do you know?
Oh, I think we'd have to go back very, very many centuries before my lifetime, probably to locate the true start.
Yeah.
But in my lifetime, I think a lot of people, I think everyone to some extent, but particularly girls and women get a lot of messaging early on. We get a lot of praise for prioritizing other people and for being helpmates and for being caring and nurturing, and we learn to equate sort of the service of others with goodness, and that our value in society and in our families is through how we serve others and how selfless we are.
Yeah. And then you add that together with the whole, happy ever after narrative.
Exactly. And I think, okay, so romantic love is the thing that will complete me. It's the happy ending to my story. And the way that I be a good partner is to fold all of my needs into this one area of trying to please this other person. And it just doesn't work. I don't think it has ever worked. I think sometimes women's lives depended upon ours doing that, but mine didn't. And yet this belief was still sort of embedded deep inside me, and actually making it impossible for me to be happy.
I mean, were you, a good girl and people pleasy from a very young age?
It's interesting. It's complicated because I contained these sort of extremes. And this was always part of my personality, where on one hand, my first instinct was always to be a people pleaser and to be a good girl. I was always got good grades in school. And then there was this other side of me that was incredibly rebellious and very self-sufficient and did not want to be told what to do. And I kind of always had a secret life. And then there would be these moments in life where it sort of erupted. Like I got good grades in school and sort of performed correctly. And then I reached a point in high school where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I dropped out of school and like moved away. And everyone was like, oh my God, what is she doing? But in some ways that was the same pattern I replicated in my relationships, where I would try so hard to be good, but the part of me that wanted to please others was at war with the truer part of me that was like, fuck this. I need to do what I need to do, and this is untenable. So I will abandon it wholesale when I can't take it anymore, which is, it's really hard to maintain relationships when you function that way. And I wasn't very able to do so for a long time.
Not really surprising. You kind of made an interesting distinction. And in fact, I think it might have been like your mum saying, or maybe you need to take a break from a relationship. But you made an interesting distinction between taking a break and making a change. Were you consciously right from the beginning of the first 3 months making a change, or did that come later?
That came a little bit later. I started by just taking a break because I didn't have a clear goal. I just knew that my life was a wreck, and that even after having been in relationships for 20 years, I had met disaster. So something was wrong, right? So I thought, let me just stop and reflect and take some time by myself, see how that feels, and think about this. But as I thought about it, it started to become clear that I needed to change. And I knew that abstinence, at that point, I had been clean and sober for over 10 years. I was a drug addict in my late teens and early 20s. And I knew that abstinence is not enough to change. You can stop for a while and get a break, but you have to do some very proactive work if you want to make different choices when that abstinence ends, right? I would say, the first 3 months, I was kind of just taking a break and figuring out the terms of that. But at the end of it, I was like, okay, I need to do something more proactive. I think I actually need to completely overhaul my relationship to love and sex and my ideal of what a relationship consists of. And so I started to make an inventory of all of my past relationships. And I performed a kind of autopsy on my history of love to figure out what the pattern was and how I wanted to change it.
Did it surprise you what you found?
It did. Rudely. It was a rude surprise because I had this story. Oh, I'm a romantic. I fall in love a lot. And I had thought, I've worked so hard to make these relationships succeed, even if they didn't. Like, I was toiling in the service of them. So that means I was a good partner, right? And then when I did this inventory and I really tried to look at my behavior and why I had made the choices I made and what the effect of them was, I realized that this endless sort of toiling and contorting to try to be a good partner and sort of accommodate my partner's wants and needs, it had essentially been a kind of manipulation because I couldn't tolerate other people being disappointed in me because I thought my worth came from that. It wasn't about actually caring for them, actually loving them and wanting to sort of be a part of their flourishing as a human. It was for me so that I could feel a certain way. People, a friend told me later on when I shared my inventory with them, people pleasing is people using. And I sort of the bottom dropped out of my stomach when I heard that because I thought, oh, wow, I think you're right. I think I've actually just been manipulating people this whole time, thinking I was being good. But really, I was doing it for myself and failing ultimately.
That is such a fascinating way of looking at it, isn't it? Because when you started talking and you were talking about contorting yourself, like the way we do contort ourselves into shapes and to fit in the boxes of other people's prescription. And then I just hadn't really thought of it before as actually in doing so, are we manipulating them? Are we manipulating their opinions? And I just, that's a real shocker, isn't it?
I was incredibly shaken by it and humbled by it. And I thought, I have in some ways taken away the agency of these partners, because if I were to show up as I am and say, I like to eat dinner at this time, I need a lot of alone time, my friendships are very important to me, my primary romantic relationship can't always be the most important thing to me, that's just not who I am, I have a lot of other passions, then I would be giving the other person the true choice to think, am I compatible with this person? Is this what I want? And each of us would have the choice to make a fully informed decision. But by eliding those truths of myself and trying to present myself as more of what I think they wanted, I was actually taking away their agency and their ability to choose if they wanted to be in a relationship with a person like me, because I was hiding the person I was. And that really sort of rocked my world. I thought, this has not been the story I was telling myself. This has been something else entirely, which was depressing on one hand, but it was also exciting on the other hand, because I thought, here's something I can change. This isn't just, there's this kind of social narrative about love, like, I just haven't found the right person, as if we're all perfectly complete and doing the right things and we just have to find the right person and everything will go perfectly. And I thought, I'm the common denominator here. I can change what I'm doing. And that was actually an empowering thing to realize.
I mean, it's the thing, isn't it? It's like, I've seen a lot of car crashes, but I've never been in one. It's like, yes, but you're always the one who's just driven across the crossroads.
Yep. Exactly.
I'm completely fascinated by that, because that What takeout shall we get? Oh, whatever you want, when really you want Chinese or you really want Indian or Thai or whatever. But then are you like trying to maneuver them into getting the takeout you want? Or are you actually going to resent the fact that you ate the takeout they wanted instead of just going, do you know what? I really want Thai.
Exactly. You're really getting at the core of it. Like this, one of the most important realizations I came to in this is that you can't cheat it. There's a certain amount of compromise that goes into a relationship, but there are limits. And if what I really want is Chinese, like I can compromise and say, no, we'll get what you want, but I can't do that forever because I can't stop myself from getting resentful. Right. And eventually the balance throws things off. Like you can't escape it. The truth of who you are and what you want will emerge some way. You can either say it directly and everyone can make informed decisions, or you can stuff it somewhere else and eventually it'll squeeze out sideways and you'll start falling out of love with the person you're with, or you'll start resenting them and have it come out other ways and they'll have unrealistic expectations. Like there's just no getting away from it. There's no shortcut. And in fact, just being authentic is sort of the simplest and easiest way, even though it's very challenging for a lot of us.
Yeah, it's kind of not necessarily what we're taught, is it?
No, it's definitely not.
I mean, I've just been thinking about the moment where you were talking in the book about how your relationships often end after your previous relationships often ended after 1 or 2 years. One of the things was you got annoyed with them cuddling you in bed.
That's right. Yeah,
but it makes sense. It makes sense with the itch because it's not about the intimacy, is it? It's about the space.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. There's no shortcut where if I had been saying what I really wanted and taking the time I needed alone, then maybe I would have been very glad to cuddle with my partners at night. But because I spent my days capitulating and compromising, then I felt crowded and suffocated and I was angry at the end of the day. And I mean, it's just so funny when I think back to myself, like lying there in bed, sort of silently kind of fuming. And then my partner's waking up and being like, good morning. And I'm like, ugh, and I did it to myself. They didn't force me to do any of that. Like the pressure was coming from inside me, which was the good and the bad news because I could decide to change.
This episode of The Shift is sponsored by Shopify. When I think back to starting The Shift, I can hardly believe I pulled it off. I mean, I knew nothing. And I had to figure it all out on my own. Scripts, scheduling, branding. When you're starting something new, it can seem like every time you tick something off your to-do list, 2 more things magically appear in their place. So finding a tool that simplifies the whole process can be a real game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world. From household names like Heinz to Allbirds and Skims. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify will help you build an online store to match your brand style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful tools to write product descriptions, headlines, and enhance product photography. Get the word out like you actually have a marketing team to create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from inventory to international shipping to processing returns, you name it. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your £1 a month trial at shopify.co.uk/shift. Go to shopify.co.uk/shift. What was it that made you decide to extend from 3 months to 6 and then on to a year?
Yeah, it was sort of like writing the book. I just knew in my bones I had barely begun. And I think in those first 3 months, I felt so free. Like it actually wasn't difficult. The abstinence itself wasn't difficult in the beginning. And I immediately felt so relieved. I was so relieved to wake up alone and to not be texting on my phone and to just really acquaint myself with what I wanted to be doing all the time. But I also was reflecting on what had gotten me there. And by the end of those 3 months, I understood that I needed to do something different and that I would just go back to what I had been doing if I didn't change. And I thought, 3 months is not enough. 3 more months probably isn't enough, but my brain can't really hold anything longer than that. So I'm going to go another 3 months and really get serious about this. And I'll see where I am at the end of that.
So did you miss, sex or intimacy in that time, in that first 3 months?
Surprisingly, I did not. Early on in that, I asked myself the question of whether masturbation would be allowed in my celibacy. And I ended up deciding that it would, because that none of the problems that had gotten me to this sort of breaking point were evident in my erotic experience with myself, which had never had any element of faking it or manipulation or performance or even self-consciousness. It was actually like a very organic, healthy, instinctive relationship. It was not compulsive at all. I actually thought, wow, I really should try to bring more of this into my relationships with other people. So it wasn't a year without orgasms, but it was a year without physical intimacy with other humans, even cuddling, And I have to say, by the end of it, I think I missed it some, but for most of it, I didn't, because I think I was so starved for that alone time. I was so starved for the autonomy that I had, And I also, when I was reflecting on my past relationships, it was very clear to me that I had had a lot of physical contact with my partners that I hadn't really wanted or that I felt ambivalent about. And no one had forced me. It had just felt like I should. And so sometimes, like cuddling during sleep or having sex, I would consent to and participate in physical experiences, sexual and otherwise, that I didn't feel enthusiastic about. And that over time did not a good thing to my brain or to my relationship to physical touch. And so I think I needed a really long break from it to really sort of re-enter my body and feel that I had full agency over the kinds of touch that I was consenting to enthusiastically.
So it's like at that point, good sex or sex at all was about your partner's sexual experience, not yours, effectively.
Yeah, not entirely, but it was a factor. There were definitely times where I was prioritizing the other person's interest and pleasure over my own lack of interest or pleasure. And this is something that I think is actually quite common. And when I saw that, I was like, why did I do that? And then I thought about all of the cynical, cliche jokes about women having sex with their husbands when they don't want to, And I thought, oh, right, this is incredibly normalized. It's just sort of expected that you're going to have sex you don't want to when you're in a long-term relationship. And that is shocking when you really stop and look at it.
Yeah, I mean, so much. I mean, maybe not quite so much now, but certainly through most of my adult life, the advice has been very much like, oh, well, it doesn't matter if you don't really want to, it's just do it anyway kind of thing to keep him happy. But most of your relationships were with other women. So the idea, I think that there's like this fantasy that this is a heterosexual problem.
Yeah. I had that fantasy. I was holding tightly to that fantasy. I think, that was why I was so confused when I had this really destructive relationship. And I thought, what is going on here? Like, I have been in therapy for decades. I am mostly in relationships with women. Like, I don't understand why I feel so compromised in relationships. And, it was hopelessly naive that by not dating men, I would be exempt from the dynamics that have characterized, domestic partnership for centuries. It's only been very recently that there have been sort of alternative models for how to be in relationships or for queer relationships. And I had still grown up in the same society. I had been subject to the same socialization as straight people. And so I brought those ideals into my relationship. And it was really helpful when I realized that, my queerness doesn't exempt me from what Adrienne Rich called compulsory heterosexuality. All of that stuff, all of those beliefs and messaging is still swimming around in me, sort of guiding my behavior, even when it conflicts with what I consciously believe.
Yeah, you're still getting the kind of the romance message, the one, the soulmate, the happy ever after,
and that the blissful sort of ecstatic early stage of connection is that is what true love is before you even know the person. It's so unrealistic, but I like rom-coms as much as the next person. I had absorbed all of the Jane Austen stories, and it was just in me, and it's like nothing has been proven more times in my life than the fact that you can intellectually know one thing and still behave, in accordance with a totally different set of beliefs, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you went down kind of, in your words, you went hurtling down a rabbit hole of female celibacy. Take us down that rabbit hole a bit, because it's absolutely fascinating, isn't it?
Oh, I just had so much fun. I'm a nerd and I like to have a project. So I started reading about voluntary female celibacy while I was celibate. Also, I sort of realized that my role models, the kind of ideal role models that I had attached to very young, were these figures who were mostly women artists who were very sort of messy and powerless in love the same way that I was, and that was a way of sort of ratifying my experience. But I knew during my celibate period that I needed a different kind of role model because I wanted different ideals. I didn't want to have my life marked by sort of a string of messy romances. And so I started reading about a lot of nuns. I got very obsessed with Hildegard von Bingen, the Benedictine abbess and saint and doctor of the church and polymath. And also probably the others that I read about the most was this sect of religious laywomen called the Beguines, who were in what is now Belgium in the Middle Ages. They started in the Middle Ages and had a few different waves. And they were not under the power of any church, but they sort of lived collectively as if they were in an abbey. And, this was a time when women had no rights, were not allowed to preach, were not allowed to divorce, really were consigned to a life of sort of a domestic slave. And these women found a loophole and they were able to live collectively, make art, do service in their communities. They preached and wrote and taught, and they were financially independent. And women could leave abusive or unwanted marriages and join this sort of collective movement and live communally with these other women and own property. I mean, it was just shocking. They really lived more independently and more freely than a lot of women do today. And I was just amazed by them. And it was so inspiring. I thought, if these women could live this freely and this consistently with their beliefs, I mean, they were burned as heretics eventually, and they didn't stop, I thought, if they can do this, I can change my pattern in dating. Like, I think I can manage, There's really nothing stopping me except myself. And it was super inspiring to have those. I also read about a bunch of radical feminists and some cult leaders, and the global history of voluntary female celibacy is a really interesting timeline. And in writing the memoir, I put my experience into conversation with a lot of these figures.
One of the things that really struck me is, the way that, firstly, celibacy does absolutely fascinate people.
Surprising. It was surprising to me. People really want to talk. I thought people would be bored when I started doing it, but everyone has lots of questions.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, we don't want to do it, but we'd like you to be the test case so you can tell us whether we should do it.
That's right.
But it was the kind of way that celibacy is. It's all about I suppose success in relationships, don't know that I'm putting it very well, is about abundance. And you had abundant success.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of flip of that is that celibacy is about lack. It's about abstinence. It's about maybe giving up something to get something, like the Beguines, like giving up sex to get freedom from men. But the portrayal, of celibacy is very, for want of a better way of putting it, I don't know, unsexy, I suppose.
It is.
I hate myself for using that phrase, but...
No, but it's true. In fact, this is a little embarrassing to admit, but during that year, I started having such a good time. And it felt, to my great surprise, everything felt so abundant and so, like, everything else in life became incredibly vivid when I stopped locating sensuality only in my romantic relationships. And when I would talk to my friends about it, I would say, I'm making celibacy sexy again. Because it really felt like such a surprise for exactly the reasons you've noted. Because when you say the word celibacy, we think, ew, deprivation. It just sounds like sad and dry and humorless or something. But it was just the opposite for me, where everything else in my life absolutely bloomed and flourished during that period. A total reversal of what I had anticipated.
I've actually written down something that you said about it, which is, I had always thought that seduction would materialize divinity. What a cosmic joke that chastity had come so much closer.
Yeah, exactly. I think, one of the ways I describe it in the book is that before my celibacy, I went around making other people my higher power, where I would sort of bring almost a religious devotion to my relationships and to other people. And that's an unrealistic relationship to have to a person. A person can't meet the needs that a divine source could, But if you locate your devotion in all of life and in many passions, then those sources really can sort of meet that need. And for me, it was friendship and art making and activism and nature and even like the simple pleasures of eating or going for a run in the park. And I just felt so much more available for sort of the beauty and divinity and even erotic capability of everything else in life once I sort of removed that one focus.
This episode is brought to you by Pluto TV. Summer of cinema is here, and Pluto TV is exploding with thousands of free movies. Feel the explosive action all summer long with movies like Gladiator, Beverly Hills Cop, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Good Burger, Stealth, Four Brothers, and Star Trek. Bring the action with you and stream for free on all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never. Stream now at Pluto.tv.
When did you start to realize that all of your, I don't know, relationships with your emotions were kind of channeled through other people?
It was certainly during that year. I would say it was probably after the initial 3 months when things sort of settled down and kind of started to deepen. And I noticed that all my other relationships, like with friends and with family and with myself, took on a much more profound quality, where I realized how much of myself had been sort of absent because I had been trying to get my needs met and seeking intimacy only through romantic relationships. And I had actually sort of neglected these other relationships. And because I think also because of the focus on romantic love in our culture, friendship love is not romanticized in the same way, but it can be very romantic and very intimate and incredibly nourishing, but we sort of take for granted that kind of love. But those relationships require tending and presence and honesty to just the same extent that a romantic relationship does. And by the end of that year, I really started to look to my friendships as a kind of model for the sort of love I wanted to create in my romantic relationships, where it felt very voluntary, and where the love was defined by support and acts of true generosity rather than this kind of more exploitative, people-pleasing, sort of oblique manipulation.
So what was when the year came to the end, What was the process? What was the process like when getting back out there? Was it a bit like, okay, day 365,
No.
back on,
I had sort of a hard deadline that I set a few times, and it was 3 months, and then at 6 months, and then at 9 months. And then after the 9-month mark, when I decided to keep going, I had changed so much in just those 9 months that I didn't feel that I needed to set another deadline. At that point, I truly felt I may never want to be in another romantic relationship. I was so fulfilled and happy and really contented with my life alone that it seemed sort of far-fetched that the idea of living with another person made my skin crawl. I thought, ew, why would I give this up? I'm so happy. Like, what could another person possibly add? But then it really was right just after the year mark that I started corresponding with this other writer. And it didn't start off romantically at all. It was just, we'd read each other's work and sort of a friendship based in mutual admiration. And we were writing letters and we hadn't met. And then when we did meet, there was sort of this instant chemistry that was not, it was not something that I engineered, and nobody seduced anyone. It really was just there. And I thought, okay, I guess we're going to see how the rubber meets the road with these new ideals. And so I started a relationship not long after the year ended, it turned out, even though I hadn't had that deadline in mind necessarily. But I didn't really do any dating. I just kind of met my person, and we took it very slow relative to my past experience. But, we've been together going on 9 years now.
I was going to say, do you think you would have met your wife, that it would have gelled in the way it has if you hadn't done it?
Definitely not. We probably would have been attracted to each other. Maybe something would have happened. But before that year, I was not capable of sustaining a long-term relationship. I would have done with her what I did with everyone else, which is so, it just makes me pinch myself now. Being in a long-term relationship is really hard work, even when you are capable of it. It often feels like operating at the outer limit of my capability, but it's so hard for me to imagine what my life would be without her now. Like, I know I would be fine, but so much of my life has now been defined by the work we've done together and the work we've done to maintain that autonomy and differentiation in our relationship. It is so different from any of my previous relationships. And even after that year, it was still, it's very different to sort of change your beliefs and ideals and then to actively behave differently in a situation. It was a whole new challenge doing that, but I was finally ready for it.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that how all of the themes of the book and the things that we've been talking about, they literally haven't changed in centuries.
It's amazing. Humans are so repetitive. So much of the way we live, you look back and we're not reinventing the wheel, or we are actually constantly.
Yeah, same old wheel. Yeah. It struck me really that whilst it obviously is a book about relationships, past relationships and about not having any, really it's about, fundamentally the book is about your relationship with yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think of this book as a love story, but it's a story about falling, and it sounds so corny, but it's true, about sort of falling in love with myself and my own independence and really learning to treasure that. It feels like a very real, tangible relationship, and one that I have to sort of tend and treat with respect as I would that with any other human.
It feels like such a cliche, but that whole thing about how if you don't love yourself, you can't love someone else, or I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it feels a bit Pinterest boardy, but it's actually true.
I know so much of cliches are rooted in those very, very true sort of universal truths that we have to sort of dig down to get, because it's not actually the ways that we're I don't know, it's not the ways that we're raised to think, like I don't know how I would have even really conceptualized, or how I did conceptualize loving oneself. I think I thought I did before, but I didn't really know what that meant.
Yeah, well, it's like phrases like self-care, and you're immediately like scented candles and,
Right. I think maybe I would have been like, yeah, sure. I go to the spa sometimes and I sleep in on the weekends. I love myself. It's like, you take care of yourself. But like, do you actually have a relationship with that person? Are you really listening to her?
No. There's a comment you make in the book about it's easy to mistake some women who've gone through the menopause for lesbians because they've both stopped giving a fuck what men think, which I just thought that was so interesting because so much is actually said and written about the sexual fluidity of women post-menopause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because now I am going through menopause and
you're too, I was just about to say you're too young, but you're not.
I'm in my mid 40s and in my family women start early. So I'm kind of near the end.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think, when I'm having conversations with friends of mine who are also going through middle-aged adolescence. And I think it's like the, what I meant by that, by women who have gone through menopause, not giving a fuck what men think about them is not so much about the hormonal shift, but about you just get to a certain point and you get fed up with keeping everyone happy all the time. And you think, I have limited time left. I want to be happy now. And it just stops. And I think the hormones can conspire with that, where it's like, the estrogen that is sort of making you, I don't know, it's a factor, I guess. But I think most of it is just that if you live to middle age, trying to do what you're supposed to do as a woman, which is take care of other people, by the time you get there, you're fucking exhausted and sick of it, know? And so your priorities just change, and keeping men happy is no longer at the top of the list. Thank God.
So did perimenopause take you by surprise or were you expecting it if it's a thing in your family?
It caught me a little bit by surprise. I just wasn't, I don't know. I don't, and maybe it would have no matter what. I knew my mom went through it early, but I just hadn't thought of it. And then I thought, why are my feet so hot while I'm sleeping?
Yes.
That was the first thing. I was like, something's wrong. My feet are like have a fever every time I go to bed at night.
Were you sleeping with your legs shoved out of the duvet?
Oh, constantly, constantly. Or like my wife would just barely touch me in my sleep and it would be like a furnace turned on. I would be like, get away from me. I'm so hot. And I had always been kind of a cold person. So yeah, it was very surprising. It's a little bit scary and a little bit thrilling just to be like, whoa, body, what's going on? Like just nature is doing its thing and I am changing. And, and there is something, I was talking with my best friend recently about how, there are like some mood changes, but sometimes it feels like the wind behind my sails so that I can finally sort of say no to things that I had trouble saying no to before. It's sort of like the last realm of my people pleasing is eroding as I'm going. And by the time I'm done, we can have a party because I will no longer need to keep anyone happy but myself unless I want to. So yeah, it's been really interesting and, I'll probably have to write about it at some point.
Oh, please do. Before I ask you the questions that I always ask at the end, I just wanted to say, Vera.
Vera.
Yes. I love that you love Vera. And in fact, this name drop, I know Anne Cleves, the writer. And so I sent her a screen grab of the page of your love letter to Vera. And it made her so happy. It's like,
give her my sincerest thanks. I have watched the entire series of Vera 3 times. It's like my comfort watch. And we're saving this last season for this summer because I'm so sad that it's ending. But yeah, she's just amazing. And truly, that was the only show. Like, she's so exceptional, and I just adore her. I watch a lot of detective shows, but she is like my ideal.
Well, it's like the point there are starting to be more older female characters, more, but they're not allowed to not think about men. Vera never thinks about men unless she's asking them to make a cup of tea.
Yeah, she's like, my wife and I had this refrain for a while because there's one episode somewhere in the middle season where she's like storming out of the office and she goes, Kenny, bag! And she's just ordering Kenny to get her bag, but she can't even bother to like form a sentence. And it's become a shorthand for just like when you're on the war path and you don't have time to be nice to anybody, Kenny, bag!
Yeah.
So I just love that she's allowed to be all she does is boss them around and make fun of them. And Yeah, she really is. What an exceptional character. I just love Anne for having created her for us.
Right. Questions that I always ask at the end. What is your emotional age?
Oh, my emotional age. I think it's probably my true age. I don't think I think I must be 44 emotionally. It doesn't make sense to say anything else. But I don't think I knew that until right now. I think I would have said younger.
Do you think, I was going to say, before the dry season, do you think you would have said much younger then?
I think I would. Yeah, I will still say that now. But I think back then I would have overestimated. I would have thought I was older. More mature. I didn't know that I was still behaving in some ways emotionally as I had when I was 15.
Give us book recommendation. So it could be anything. It can be a lifelong favorite or it can be something new, anything at all.
Okay. Well, I read 2 books recently that I really loved. One is a novel, The Safe Keep by Yael van der Wooden. And it just sort of has all the things I want in a novel. It's juicy and compelling and surprising. And it has sex scenes that are entire chapters long. They're so good. And it's deep. Beautiful writing, really beautiful book. And then this other novel, very different, called Kick the Latch by Catherine Scanlon, which is this short novel that is derived from these interviews that the author did with this woman who lived on the show horse circuit, kind of like a narrative of kind of a blue collar existence of working with a traveling horse circuit. And it was just beautiful, strangely moving, special book.
Brilliant. What advice would you give younger women?
A couple of things. I think my advice to younger women would be, the first thing is no should. Start working now on getting rid of the whole concept of should in your mind. Your future self will thank you. And I think the other one is you're right on time. I had the sense when I was young that I was behind or running out of time, or I had to hurry up and get to a certain place. And I missed a lot, and I think if I could go back, I would say to myself, you're right on time. Just be where you are. Just see what's here.
Who's your old broad role model?
My old broad role model. I mean, Hildegard of Bingen.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, Audre Lorde. Take your pick. So many. I would be nowhere if it wasn't for all the old broads that showed me what's possible in life and through their work.
What's your superpower?
I can write memoir without ever thinking about what anyone else is going to think about it or me, which is pretty niche superpower, but not a lot of people can do that.
But it is a superpower.
Mm-hmm. I can really draw the blinds and just be totally honest. And it's the one place, that's why I'm a writer, I think. It's the one place where I don't ever think about what someone else is going to think. Later on, I do, But when I am sitting down and initially trying to get to the truth of something, it is only what's in here, what's in me that matters. And that has saved my life.
And last one, how many fucks do you give?
Oh, it depends on the day. Sam. I would say I give fewer fucks than I ever have before. And that is a triumph.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.